I'm Mike Dowdy, and this is the School Leadership Show. Welcome to the only podcast dedicated to helping practicing and aspiring school leaders realize their potential, advance their careers, and achieve work-life balance. The School Leadership Show brings together the greatest minds from inside and outside of education to deliver you the insights and tools you need to succeed in school leadership. This is the show we wish we had 20 years ago. This show is about you. We're here to help you become the best school leader you can be while still having a life outside of work. In this episode, I interview political reporter, television pundit, and author Eleanor Clift. Eleanor is a regular contributor to the Daily Beast and has a long history covering national politics, every presidential election since 1976. Many people know Eleanor as a perennial panelist on the syndicated talk show The McLaughlin Group. I started watching the group as a high school student in the early 90s, and I've been a faithful viewer ever since. Eleanor and I talk about writing, communication with new media, what makes a good leader, and the challenges facing K-12 education. She even predicts the candidates and the outcome of the 2016 presidential election. To learn more about Eleanor and her work, visit eleanorclift.com. Enjoy this interview with Eleanor Clift.
My name is Eleanor Clift. I'm a reporter and writer for the Daily Beast, which is an online site. I'm based in Washington. I was with Newsweek magazine for a very long time, having started there as a secretary back in the dark ages. And so I have had a sort of a front row of history through these decades, and I've also watched kind of the rise and fall of the mainstream media and the new media world that we live in today. So it's quite fascinating, and I try to keep my perspective on politics and keep practicing journalism like I was taught. Actually, I was self-taught, so it's a little bit of a contradiction.
Well, and thank you, Eleanor, so much for being part of this podcast and agreeing to do this interview. And I have found that, sometimes some of the folks who are not directly connected to education have some of the most helpful things to say to those of us in education.
Well, I'm a fan of public education. I went to the public schools in Queens, New York. When I was 13, I won an essay contest on what the United Nations means to me, and Eleanor Roosevelt was one of the judges. And she commented
that's unbelievable, by the way, that Eleanor
right? Yeah, and she commented on how similar our names were, because I was Eleanor Roelofs then. My parents were immigrants from a little tiny island in the North Sea off of Germany and Denmark. Roelo, double F as in Frank, S as in Sam. Anyway, it made a big impression on me at the time, and it kind of even grew in my imagination over the years. So I think maybe the seed for my eventually becoming a journalist may have been planted that day with that contest.
And I want to come back to some of the challenges related to public education and some things like that. But I thought maybe we could start by talking about leadership in general. And you've had a long career of writing about and reporting on leaders at all different levels of government. And I wondered, based on what you've observed over time, what would you say makes a good leader?
I think the ability to state a clear position and to persuade others to the correctness of that position, and more than persuade, to inspire. I look at the people in my life who I've regarded as leaders / mentors, I suppose. I remember my 6th grade elementary school teacher. It was the first male teacher I ever had, and I really looked up to him. And I think he was different. He was commanding, and he seemed to take an interest in me, which I didn't feel like other teachers particularly did. Anyway, he made a big impression on me. A Newsweek bureau chief in in Atlanta, which is where I became a reporter. He was so imaginative, and he would tell us that if you wanted to be a journalist, you needed to know about lots of different things. And on Wednesday afternoons, he would close the bureau and we would go to the Atlanta Library, which was screening the series Civilization with Alistair Cook. And so he was, I regarded him as a leader because he could inspire me. So I think, persuasion and inspiration are a huge part of being a leader. But you can't do that unless you really know what you want to inspire people to do and what you want to persuade them to do. And so that sort of clarity of purpose, I think, is important for anybody who wants to establish themselves as a leader. And look at this. My children went to public schools here in the District of Columbia, and I just remember the principals and the teachers who stood out. And when stories were written about the success of a particular school, it was often attributed to the personality of this, of one person. I've always wondered, why can't we replicate that? But it often has to do with the power of one person's personality.
And conversely, I think there's probably a similar impact when you think about the common mistakes that leaders make. Any thoughts on that?
Common mistakes that leaders make. Well, I suppose overpromising and underdelivering would be the major one. Not communicating well enough in a school setting. You really have to do that with parents. Here again in the District of Columbia, Michelle Rhee was here for a while, and she has this reputation as this great education reformer. Very mixed attitudes about her. And one of the mistakes she made here was that she closed a whole bunch of schools and she transferred principals around. She never really clearly explained why to the parents who were most directly involved. So she left a lot of broken china behind, if you will. So I think your communications is huge, and if you're in any kind of public position, unless you really state your message clearly and over and over again, because you have to repeat things. People have busy lives. They don't pick up on things just instantaneously. You can end up with a huge backlash against what you're doing, even if your intentions are very honorable.
So, and you mentioned before about being a good journalist means knowing a lot about a lot of different things. How do you approach research? I mean, what's your approach to gathering information about a topic that you might not know a lot about?
Well, it's two parts. One is osmosis, just by being sort of tuned into your environment. In my case, I'm old school. I still get the New York Times, the Washington Post, delivered in paper form every morning. I listen to public radio, which I greatly respect their reporting skills. C-SPAN, the political channels. So all of that fills in throughout the day. And then if I have a particular story to work on, then you first of all you Google all the relative parts so you can download relevant information, and then I call people on the phone and have conversations with people on Capitol Hill, people in the White House, and the administration, and I think talking to people is still the best way to get information. More and more sources now kind of like to blow you off with a quick email, but it's not the same. So I particularly value telephone reporting. Now, being there in person is also better than the telephone, but you can't always get people to commit to a face-to-face meeting. You can't always be at every event. And so the telephone now is, I think kind of a prized mode of communication because it's in danger almost of being supplanted by email. I mean, it used to be you would have as a journalist, you would have all these calls you needed to return. Hardly anybody ever calls me anymore. It's mostly always by email.
And I think you can't. I think you're absolutely right. You can't read any nuance or emotion or tone in email like you can in a phone call or
Right.
a face-to-face conversation.
Or you might read the wrong emotion or tone
Exactly.
into it. That's right. Yeah.
Now, are there any online sources that other than the Daily Beast, of course, that you kind of go to regularly or consult regularly?
Not really. I have people whose opinions I trust who send me lots of things, and I kind of do that. Politico, Huffington Post. If they've got anything that's in my world that I need to be interested in, I'm going to know about it pretty quickly. And of course, your Twitter feed is also a source of information.
Who do you follow on
yeah,
Twitter?
I couldn't even tell you who were at the top of my list anymore, but that is still not my first, my preferred method of receiving communication. But in this world where you're surrounded by information all the time, it's not like I worry that I'm not learning something. It's more that I think. It's more that I want to sort of protect myself from the barrage, so that I can think for myself and not, be dependent on what everybody else says.
Well, and I think that's something that we're facing in education. That I have a 13-year-old daughter, and anytime there's a question about something, it's right to Google. And without, well, I wouldn't say without, but I think sometimes she has a hard time filtering and determining the quality of the information.
Right. No, I think that needs to be taught in school. Actually, you have to teach people, critical thinking and how to evaluate what they're seeing. And just because it's on the internet ain't necessarily so.
Exactly.
They would probably be skeptical of something they saw in a newspaper, but somehow the internet to young people is like God. Like everything it's the stone tablets from on high.
Now, if you think about and I often worry about, every generation worries about the generations that come after it in terms of, their connectedness to our political system, our government, things like that. If you were going to make a recommendation on one book that you think, people should read to really understand and get a feel for our political system, what would you recommend?
I would recommend What It Takes by Richard Ben Cramer, which is really not a comprehensive look at our political system. It's profiles of political candidates who ran in 1988. But it's the most nuanced look at these people. May include, I think, John McCain is maybe one of them, and Joe Biden, and names that some people may recognize. But it's what it takes in terms of the stamina, the commitment, what they encounter. It's really a kind of a close-in look at at the political terrain. And I don't think McCain is not one of them. Confusing him with there's another book that's very good about the generation of leaders. But anyway, I would recommend that book. And then, this is a little self-serving, but with the help of a young man named Matthew Spieler, a book came out under my name, I guess about 2 years ago, called Selecting a President, which is a kind of a primer on the mechanics of the political system with some anecdotal support, and it's meant to be a readable book, and it's meant for high school seniors, college freshmen. It's aimed at that market, so that might be something you might be interested in.
Oh, excellent. And do you have any guilty pleasure politically based TV shows that you like?
Right. To go back on the book that I was thinking about that involves McCain, I think, is the Nightingale's song, and
Okay.
it's about West Point not West Point, Annapolis graduates that go into the political system.
Oh,
Okay,
cool.
TV shows. I like Mad Men. There's a whole bunch of new shows now that I really haven't caught up with. On Sunday nights I like Madam Secretary, so I kind of go for the politically themed shows. And of course, I loved West Wing, and I liked the Newsroom when that was on with Jeff Daniels. So you can see where my tastes lie. House of Cards. I bought the third season, and I'm working my way through it. They'll be out with another season by the time I get to the end of that. That's really the dark side of politics, but so well done with Kevin Spacey.
It's unbelievable. You have to get caught up. It's
Yeah,
it's fantastic.
So that's a good one. I don't know. Do young people watch that? Do teenagers watch that?
Good. I'm not sure. That's a good question. I know.
And if you want to educate them on politics, really, is that what they should be watching? I don't know.
Probably not House of Cards.
Yeah.
Though.
Yeah.
West Wing, though, I think was really well done, and you had such a close connection to that in terms of the the political system at the time. Do you think that was pretty close to the way things worked?
Oh, it's how you would want them to work. The president who's a real liberal, and I think Barack Obama certainly fits into that, and then Bill Clinton to some extent also. I mean, these were presidents who, for the most part, voice the political values that I support. And the thing is, from the perspective of a reporter, when you cover a White House, every successive administration gets harder in terms of access and how they try to just funnel everything through the press secretary. It's not as much fun being a reporter these days as it was 20 years ago.
Really? Why would you say? And why would you say that? Just because of the access?
Yeah, the access is very difficult. I mean, when Clinton was in the White House, he had a lot of young people working for him, and you could actually reach them pretty directly on the phone. It's very hard today to get through to White House aides on the phone. They don't really do business that way, and they don't really want a whole lot of direct access with the press. Now, if you're a reporter for the flagship New York Times or even the Washington Post, I'm sure you get paid a lot more attention than the rest of us do. So,
do you think that's a generational thing about communication preferences, or do you think it's more about just generally closing off access?
I think every successive administration works to close off access because they don't see any percentage, and sort of they try to manage the message and all of that. I don't even fault them for it. It's just the way it works. And Obama is now the first, I guess, social media president, and they have lots of ways to go around with the established White House press corps. I also think people are just overwhelmed. Everybody is just bombarded with so much to do and so many emails every day that everybody's looking for shortcuts in how you interact. So I think it's just the way it is.
So let's talk about some of those shortcuts. How do you manage your email and all the barrage of information coming to you? Any tricks or?
I mean, you look and you see what really needs attention, and you do that. And then when you have some time and you want to rest your brain, and you kind of go back through the backlog of email that you missed and see if you did miss something, and you just delete in large numbers. I don't think I have any particular secrets to that. I hate what I hate the most is when people send you something and then follow up to make sure you got it. Now maybe once or twice you really didn't, and maybe that follow up is necessary. But there's a lot of kind of unnecessary email, and a lot of people hit reply to all the time. And but those are minor complaints. I think it's a wonderful thing that we can communicate so easily. It's terrific.
And I've taught courses at the at the college at the postgraduate level for people who are becoming administrators, and over time, I feel like I've seen the quality of people's writing decline over time. Do you think that social media and the way we communicate now, very text based, is helping or hurting the overall quality of people's ability to write?
Yeah, I don't want to say helping or hurting. I think changing. I mean, first of all, I gather they're not teaching cursive writing anymore in elementary schools. So
Depends. But
I don't know how people are going to learn to print, and then you don't have to sign a signature anymore. We just communicate differently, and when I write a piece for the Daily Beast, how is that different from what I did when I wrote for Newsweek? It's a little bit different. I think online you have to be very cognizant of trying to grab people's attention quick. You was a little more leisurely in the news magazine, although it was always a great premium placed on the lead, the anecdotal lead, and grabbing people's attention and getting them involved in the story. But all of that, sort of adding more sizzle to the steak, is part of life on the internet. And the value of stories is always also mentioned or measured by the number of clicks you get and that sort of thing. So I think there's some difference in the way I would write a story for Newsweek versus Fleur, but it's not a drastic difference. But if I were to convey that story on Twitter, and I would have 140 characters, then the challenge would be to boil it down to the 140 characters and then hope that somebody's interested in knowing a little bit more. So I think these are different strokes for different folks, and I'm not prepared to say it's good or it's bad. I did teach a college course at Hunter College in New York earlier this year, and I did request essays from the students, and I think my takeaway from that is that they really didn't have a whole lot of experience in drafting a 800-word essay. Writing a topic sentence, which looks so easy when it's on the paper, is a very hard thing to do. And crafting something that has a beginning, middle, and end, and summarizing it, and then stating your points. That kind of basic outline of how to write. Not everybody's going to be a great writer, but to be able to just know the format of how you put something together, I thought that was extremely lacking in at least the students that I encountered, and they were all in college, and some of them were on scholarship. So I thought they should have known more about how to put an essay together.
Yeah, and things that we start teaching in elementary school. I mean, when you really peel it back to its most basic components, those are things that we're teaching kids in the primary and intermediate grades.
So we are teaching it, but
well, maybe not the right way, but we're
yeah.
Now, do you think you mentioned kind of the measure of a piece these days is how many clicks you get? Do you feel like that kind of feedback has influenced your approach?
My answer to that is going to be somewhat facetious. It probably hasn't influenced my approach enough. I mean, I don't really. Somebody else checks all that out. I don't really go back and look. How did this piece do? How did that piece do? And we are expected to promote what we write. And again, I remember the days where you wrote your piece, and then there was somebody else who did the marketing of it. And now, if you do a piece, you're kind of expected to promote it on every social media platform that you have. And I have not really done that as aggressively as I should.
Well, I saw that tweet that came out. I think it was tweeted out today on the McLaughlin Group Twitter feed. The piece you wrote about Pelosi.
Yes, but Yes, I don't write that.
Right.
Yeah, somebody does that for the McLaughlin Group, and I should be doing that on Facebook and Twitter. Maybe you're reminding me. Maybe I should get around to that at some point today.
There's no judgment or guilt here. No,
Yeah,
it's fine.
no, it's the way it works. But if you grew up in kind of the old school journalism, that it comes across like this is too much self promotion, or it's too much about me, and this shouldn't be my job. And so I think people in my generation, there's kind of a resistance to doing it, whereas younger people, it just comes to them totally naturally. Oh, I did this. Let me put it up here. Let me try to get a picture to go with it. And it's a different mindset. So I've adjusted to some extent, but you asked me, how I've changed, and I think my answer is an honest one. I haven't changed enough. I've changed enough to survive, but I could do better.
Now, in terms of writing, when you go to compose a piece, do you sit at a computer and use a keyboard? Do you handwrite? How do you begin composing?
Oh, I sit at the computer.
Do you? Okay.
And yeah, and I do try to get a lead. I mean, some people say if you don't, you could write the lead last, or if you can't come up with a good lead, just go on. I find that I have to. The way I operate is I have to kind of put something down there. I can go back and make it better later, which I might do, but I need to kind of start at the beginning, and that's what I do. And don't write a formal outline, but as I go along, I sort of put some keywords down as to where I'm going with the piece, and usually it kind of begins to shape itself.
Do you ever get writer's block? Do you believe in such a thing?
No, I think that's kind of a luxury. I mean, generally, if you're writing for a living and you have deadlines, you can't afford to have writer's block. And in this world of the internet, the turnaround times are so fast that you just gotta plunge in. It's kind of like going swimming, and water may be cold and not appealing, but you're not gonna hop in. I mean, this last Thursday, I was part of a small group of columnists that met with Nancy Pelosi, and she talked about a lot of different subjects. And it was like at 2:00 in the afternoon, and she got up twice to go vote. And what was most interesting about what she said was the way that she and the Democrats were prepared to save Republican Speaker John Boehner. He had decided to stay on as Speaker, that they weren't going to let a kind of a rump group of conservative Republicans force out their own Speaker. She felt that would be a real stain on the institution. So I came back to the office, and we thought, the editor thought, how Nancy Pelosi was ready to save John Boehner is a good piece. He wanted it that evening, or he said, well, maybe you can get it to me mid-morning the next day. Well, the next day I had something in the morning, so I basically came home and finished the piece about 9:00 that evening. Now, they didn't post it until today, but that was Thursday night. Yeah, so I turned it in Thursday night. So that's a pretty quick turnaround, actually. And back in the old days of Newsweek, I probably would have had 3 days. I don't know that 3 days would have made the piece any better, because I wrote it basically with a lot of kind of emotion, and I thought it was fascinating, kind of a first draft of history. And so in a way, it was easy to write. You're one source. You talk to one person, so it didn't have all these side avenues, and there wasn't a whole lot of additional research I had to do. So in some ways, it was easy, but still, you doing the interview, then coming back and writing it is a faster turnaround than I have been accustomed to in the past. But I can do it, and it's kind of fun, because then it's over and out. Well, you're on to the next thing.
And how much? With that kind of quick turnaround time, how do you edit and revise? Is somebody else reading it and giving you feedback?
Well, with that, there were about 8 or 10 journalists there, and the editor asked. We tried to figure out, were they all going to go back and write that night? How much time did we have? And there was one woman from the Huffington Post who had her computer, her laptop, and she was taking notes on her laptop as we were sitting there. Everybody else, Gene Robinson from the Washington Post, Al Hunt from Bloomberg, E.J. Dionne from the Washington Post were columnist types, and I figured they weren't going to go rush back and turn out a column right away. But I thought Huffington Post might. So the editor figured we needed to get it up either, immediately the following day. Well, as it turned out, it was up on Friday. He went over it, and he basically it held up. He said he barely touched it. So it's not. I haven't experienced heavy editing at the Daily Beast. At Newsweek, it was a whole different experience. Newsweek was like, it was compared to stone polishing, the lapidary process. You had a national affairs editor, and then there was an editor above him, and then a top editor. And by the time you went through all of those layers, often what you started out with and ended up with were barely resembled each other. It was extremely different. And so the internet, the bar isn't as high, at least I found. I mean, again, they're eager for content. It's not. You don't have like 3 or 4 editors, second guessing you, because those resources don't exist anymore. There was an army of fact checkers at Newsweek. That doesn't exist anymore. You're basically responsible for your own facts. And, the immediate editor in Washington looks at it and somebody in New York looks at it, but they're not underlying every sentence and putting a check mark next to it to certify it like we did at Newsweek back in the day. So everything is speeded up, and I think probably more mistakes creep into things as well.
Well, when the news cycle moves so quickly, there's always
right,
something
but you
else.
Also you can correct it. In fact, I
Right.
made one correction on the Pelosi story that her press person emailed me about this morning, and it was the number of Republicans who voted basically for defaulting on U.S. Credit. The number was, she had talked about a couple of sets of numbers, and I had a wrong number in there. And so they can fix that, and that's nice. When you make an error in a print magazine, there's no pulling it back. I guess the following week you can have a little box saying these errors were made.
Yeah, but nobody reads those.
No, the corrections never catch up. And a minor thing like this, a number, I think they probably just changed without, notifying the reader that this change had been made. They do if you make a significant change in your copy. Then you're obliged to say an earlier version of this article said this or something. This has been changed. And I think that's important, too.
So I want to be respectful of your time, but I really can't let you go without talking a little bit about the McLaughlin Group. So I told you when I initially contacted you what a big fan I am, and I started watching as a high school student in the early 90s with my friend Angie, who can't wait for this podcast to come out because
okay. The McLaughlin Group is designed after I think a men's locker room. My late husband used to say it's like a lot of towel snapping and everybody trying to impress each other, and it's not a particularly comfortable environment for a woman. And it took me some time to get into the groove. When John first asked me to do the show, I would say something, and then they would simply go back to what they were doing. They didn't really engage me, and it was only when Bob Novak, who used to do the show, would kind of wag his finger at me and say Eleanor Clift and people of her ilk, and he would take me on directly. And once they were going to start insulting me to my face, and we could get that back and forth going, I felt like I became a real member of the group. And Pat Buchanan and I have now been doing this for some time, and I have great respect for him. I really like the guy, and he has been part of so much of our political evolution. I mean, ran for president a couple of times, and when he doesn't have his partisan hat on, he's quite a good commentator and analyst. He said to me today off air that he was predicting who the final four are going to be in the Republican field. He said Trump, Carson, Rubio, and Cruz. He's writing off Jeb Bush. Said he feels sorry for him. Of course, Pat ran against Poppy Bush, and
Yep.
I think the father Bush probably feels that Pat had a role in costing him his reelection.
Do
So
you agree
it's
with that?
complicated.
Do you agree with that Final Four?
Yeah, I mean, whenever you face a vigorous primary challenge, that's trouble. But more importantly, Pat Buchanan went to the Republican convention that year in Houston and gave a very inflammatory speech, holding basically saying we've got to take back the streets, one by one. And it was also the year that Marilyn Quayle gave she was the wife of the then vice president, and she gave kind of an anti-working woman speech. Anyway, that convention really went off the rails. So I think it wasn't only Pat Buchanan who caused Bush to lose his reelection. You also had Ross Perot in the picture. So there were a lot of different phenomena. But
you think that one was more of a mess than this one is?
No, I mean, I think Ross Perot had some valuable things to say actually, and he forced the deficit onto Bill Clinton's political agenda. I mean, he really helped shape the election. What's different about this time is the sheer volume of candidates makes it different, and then Trump has, well, just like Perot, Trump did seem to appear from nowhere, but I think Trump is a reality TV star. At least, Perot was just a pure businessman. I think Trump brings a lot more cards to the table than Perot had.
All right, so predictions. Who's the Democratic nominee?
I think that's an easy one. It's Hillary Clinton.
All right.
The odds are she's the virtually certain Democratic nominee, and I think the odds better that she'll be the next president than better for her than for anyone else in the field.
How about for a vice president for her? Who do you think?
I think that she, depending on who the Republicans nominate, she might want to look at a Hispanic, and you've got the Castro brothers, and particularly HUD Secretary Juan Castro would be a choice that would reflect the changing of the generations plus the growth of the Hispanic community. Otherwise, I think she would look to Virginia or Ohio, again, depending on who the Republicans pick. Ohio, Sherrod Brown could help ensure Democrats are competitive in Ohio, and he's a very good progressive senator. And Tim Kaine in Virginia, he's in the Senate now. He's former governor in Virginia. Virginia and Ohio are two states that the Democrats would really like to keep in their column. And no Republican has won the presidency without carrying Ohio. So I look at John Kasich could very well end up on the ticket number 2 spot if he doesn't make number 1. Anyway, there's a lot of chess pieces to move around at this point.
So do you have one memorable moment in particular from the McLaughlin Group that, funny or interesting, something that really stands out when you think about your decades involvement with that?
That's a tough one. I mean, every show kind of stands on its own, and I mean the way that John McLaughlin manages to make issues that none of the other Sunday shows consider. Like today, we led with the historic meeting between the Chinese leader and the Taiwanese leader in Singapore this weekend. I'll bet you didn't even know that was happening.
Only from reading The Economist blog.
Okay. Well, we migrated from that into the potential of war with China. So I don't know. I just find it hard to single out a particular back and forth. It's it goes by in such a blur, and I do feel sometimes like I'm in a kind of a Catholic catechism class, because John is a former Jesuit priest and Pat is a very devout Catholic, and they often will argue the fine points of religion. And Pat usually wins that one. I think John's priesthood days are far away and are long way away. He's in a new life now.
So, any advice for either practicing or aspiring school leaders?
I guess remain optimistic, and I think the emphasis on testing has really depressed people. It's the equivalent of what judges face when they have all these mandatory sentences, where you almost can't exercise your judgment and your talents because it's all set out for you. And I think that the testing has really gotten out of hand. So I think, Lord knows, I mean, they should be giving me advice. I think people on the front lines of education today are really fighting the good in the most needed battles. And I think it's also incumbent on anybody in those professions to try to look at every child as unique, and not to lump them together, and especially not to write them off too early. And when you read about the number of kindergartners who are suspended, or that shouldn't be. So those are my thoughts.
Perfectly said. And Eleanor Clift, I can't thank you enough for taking time to talk with me today. This was fantastic. This is, if I could go back and tell my high school self that this would have happened, I wouldn't have believed it, I'm sure. So
and if I could go back and tell my high school self that, that I would be taking part in this iconic television show, I wouldn't have believed it either. So,
well,
all right.
I can't let you go without saying, Eleanor, gee, I think you're Swellinor.
Okay, all right.
So
thank you, and just that you should just yell wrong at me.
Yeah, but you were right most of the time. So
okay.
Thanks for listening to the School Leadership Show, a podcast for aspiring and practicing school leaders by school leaders. Send your comments, questions, and show ideas to mike@schoolleadershipshow.com. And now it's time to rate the podcast in iTunes and leave a comment. No, really, it's time to do it. So when you're done here, go right to iTunes, rate the podcast, leave a comment. Thanks.